Hello and welcome to another installment of the Wyfutbol podcast with me, Michael Dryden and Etches Adokru. Today we'll be talking all about super agents, the top grossing among them, the history of football agents and their influence on the game. Before we start, please follow us on Twitter at Yfootball_ and subscribe with us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Acast and YouTube. Etches, good afternoon, how are you?
Yeah, good. I had to think about that one. Yeah, pretty good. I was wheeling the Gets album, which came out, I think it was yesterday. So
Oh, very
it's
nice.
been it's been pretty good. Aside from that, uh, it's Pancake Day on Tuesday. Was it
Yeah.
Tuesday? Um, yeah, I felt like I should have made some pancakes. Attempted some much later actually on Friday, just because I thought I would, and it just went terribly. So
All right.
thought I'd share that with people. Just a bit of pain in my heart.
All right, moving on.
How are you, John? You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Sunderland have finally had their takeover announced, so I won't
Oh,
bore us
you've
over that.
been dying to announce that. You've been dying to
Yeah, it
say
was
that,
on
haven't you?
Thursday, so it's finally a bit of hope, Etches. That's all right. We went through a lot, and I'm not going to dwell on it, but time has finally come. I think anyway, for the club to actually move forward. So,
I think we should stop that there, to be honest.
agreed. So, Etches, why the episode on super agents?
So this is an idea from a friend of mine, Joe Haskins. Shout out to Joe. He basically wanted to know about how Jorge Mendes came about, where he started and how he's basically become a super agent.
Mm,
So agents nowadays, especially the so-called super agents, are kind of seen as celebrities. They speak freely about their clients at public. For example, Jonathan Barnett has had so many examples with Gareth Bale.
mm.
He's discussed his future, criticized Zidane, he's done all sorts. And also, these agents are quite heavily involved during transfer sagas. I remember Mina Raiola once said that Arsenal didn't have the balls to sign Henrik Mkhitaryan.
The balls.
Yeah, which is a bit mad for an agent to say publicly, but that's what these super agents kind of do, right? Um, so when we discuss super agents, we're kind of talking about people like Mina Raiola, Jorge Mendes, Pini Zavi, Jonathan Barnett. But what specifically makes them super? You know, how is their how is their influence in football developed, and how much more will it grow? And also a little bit of backstory as to when did agents actually enter the game? I
Yeah.
think it's quite an interesting point as well. And finally, are super agents actually beneficial for football?
Yeah, because we hear about the super agents in the press, as you mentioned, but there's actually a hell of a lot of agents that exist away from that who are earning a lot less and are in kind of the day to day running of football. Because there is a stigma around agents, agents that they're really interested in money. But I think it's interesting to consider as well as kind of playing devil's advocate to an extent. But what do players feel, or how do players feel about their agents? Do they really, are they really thankful, or how do they facilitate their careers? And I think it's an interesting topic to discuss. I mean, regardless if you're Akin Fenwer or you are Kylian Mbappe, uh, you still have to play a bit of a game of cat and mouse with your club when it comes to contracts or with a new club. And so there is a necessity, I think, to have that middleman. It's unregulated and it's just a bit of it just seems as if agents are getting a little bit too much slice of the pie.
So, kind of to go into the history of football agents, apparently before the 1990s, most players did not use agents at all. Most of them used their parents. But because of parents' naivety in the football business, these young footballers are often given less than stellar contracts by
Mm.
clubs, which yielded in lower salaries than they ought to deserve. Apparently, in Sweden, there are only 3 licensed agents in 1995, and that went up to 33 in 2002. Overall, in 2002, there were 187 licensed in football worldwide, which is pretty
Mm.
mad. Obviously,
Mm.
since 2001, the agents are now licensed by separate FAs, so it's quite difficult to pinpoint when agents specifically enter the game. But there is a man called Dennis Roach, who was regarded as football's first high-profile agent, who had a career of more than 2 decades. So he helped negotiate deals for some of the best players
Yeah.
in the world, including Johan Cruyff, Glenn Hoddle, Mark Hughes, Terry Venables, and Harry Redknapp. And he was also behind the world's first 1 million transfer fee, which was paid for who?
Big Trev.
Yeah,
Caught me off guard there.
yeah, Big Trevor Francis. Very well done in 1979. It's still quite a difficult number to deduce how many agents there are in the game currently. In 2015, there's rumored to be around 6,000 worldwide, but that number has since reduced due to new regulations put in place.
I mean, go back to your point before about players would often get not they're represented by their families, not getting the wage they perhaps deserve. I mean, football has traditionally been a working class sport, so often talent is being picked up from playgrounds, from Sunday league clubs, from like the commons of London, and without representation, those players could get taken advantage of. You could have agents that turn up with a pair of football boots that perhaps a kid from a lower income family couldn't perhaps afford, particularly the higher quality versions. They might be able to furnish them with footballs, etc., just equipment generally, and that actually can help facilitate um, their break into the game alongside the likes of getting a trial, for example, with a football club. So there definitely is a necessity there, I think, at that level, and it even translates the modern era because I mean, look how expensive football boots are. I mean, it's a 250 pound pair of football boots you can get now, and that's expensive for a lower income family to buy year on year as their kid grows. It's a lot
Yeah,
of money. And so I think there's a necessity there, but it, yeah, I mean, we're going to go on to it now, but I mean, agents just seem to be getting incredibly more influential, even at the very kind of grassroots element of the game.
no, I completely agree with you. What boots did you wear when you were playing football in your youth? Did you wear some Sondicos or?
Well, I actually it was a bit annoying. I initially had the classic Predators, the
Mm,
Dirk Beckham Predators, Adidas Predators. I then got this like quite lame pair of, I think it was like a Sondico pair. Like this, I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was like 8 or 9. Then I went back to some vapors,
mm.
some Nike vapors, and then when I broke my leg playing at uni, and they got cut off by the ambulance staff. I had a pair of F50s, and they were like the top range ones, like expensive pair, and they got cut off, and I broke my leg. So that was heartbreaking, and I haven't bought a pair since.
Have you not?
Well, no, I have, but it's like a really, really like kind of poor pair that I wear for five-a-side. But
Ah, fair play. So the next week, I thought I'd go through football super agents. So I got some data from Transfer Market as of 2019. I think I had to mention the year because I don't want shots fired from someone. Some of my enemies out there might try and gun me down, so I thought I'd let them know it is data from 2019. But it's the top 5 grossing agents in the world. I doubt it's changed too much with the names on the list. But first on it is Jonathan Barnett with commissions at $128 million. His contracts totaling, so the value of all the contracts he has at 1.28 billion, which is
Jesus.
actually a lot of money.
Yeah.
Uh, Jonathan Barnett is the founder of Stellar Group Limited. Funnily enough, his actual first client in sport was Brian Lara. Those cricket games were top tier.
Yeah, top notch, mate. I mean, I've
Yeah,
just noticed you popped it on notes there. He's he must be 71 now, is he?
yeah, it's pretty old.
That is crazy to think that the top super agent is that old. I mean, they're
Mm,
not. None of them are spring chickens, particularly Mina,
mm.
for a number of reasons. But yeah, I mean, Brian Lara cricket game was just out of this world, and I've yet to see a cricket game really on PlayStation or Xbox really reach those heights.
Yeah, I think cricket and rugby games are absolutely garbage. But moving back on to Jonathan Barnett. Yeah, so weirdly, yeah, his first client was Brian Lara, and he was also involved with bringing up Lennox Lewis through as well. So he actually was involved in quite a few different sports
Hmm.
before settling on football, where his clients currently include Gareth Bale, Saul Niguez of Atletico, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, and Jordan Pickford. He was also the mastermind behind Bale's £86 million move from Tottenham
Hmm.
to Real Madrid. His agency is the 4th biggest in the world in all sports and the number 1 in football. And the best fact about Jonathan Barnett by a country mile was he was part of the scandal with Cashley Cole in 2006.
Actually.
That's not a typo, that's Cashley Cole. In 2006, he was banned by the Football Association for 12 months and fined £100,000 for arranging a secret rendezvous between his client Cole and Chelsea Football Club. So that was the whole situation there. Arsenal were crying because they believed the player was being tapped up. I think we ended up selling Cole anyway for 5 million plus William Gallas, which looking back at the time was a
Yeah.
stellar deal for Arsenal. And Gallas was absolutely garbage.
Was it still a deal? What, to lose Cole for 5 mil?
Well, yeah,
So
we lost Cole for 5 mil, but William Gallas was starting for Chelsea. He's a very good player,
yeah,
but he
well, I was
was
just
not.
yeah, I was just looking because I mean, 100k is not a lot. I mean, I was trying to think back to when it was. I mean, um, it would have been around kind of 2008. That was Mourinho, yeah, about 2008, yeah, 2007, around that time. So,
Mm,
well, I suppose if you made 10% of the deal, then you would have made 500k. So, it doesn't
yeah.
seem like it's a fine that's kind of representative of the crime to extent. But yeah, it's
Well,
interesting.
the deal at the time, I think Ashley Cole wanted to be paid. Was it six? No, the deal Arsenal offered him was 50k or 55k, and Cashley Cole famously said, "When
Yeah,
I
yeah,
saw what they offered me, I nearly swerved my car off the road." So I hope he has a very unhappy day-to-day life
yeah. But
currently.
didn't he? I swear he only got like a fraction more. I might be wrong.
Yeah, he did.
I swear it was like 60, 65k or something. But they don't call him Cashley for nothing, I suppose. So.
Yeah, he's one of those weird players where obviously he came through Arsenal's ranks, but he associates himself with Chelsea now, which is quite interesting. But that's for
Mm.
another day. I'm getting quite angry, so we'll move on. Um, Moving to number two on the list is the person Barnett said is the only person in football to be close to him, and that is Jorge Mendes, with his
Mm.
commissions at $118 million. Contracts are worth $1.18 billion, which is mad as well.
Yeah.
Mendes had a football career and was forced to end early after he was rejected by several clubs. He then worked in a bar, and he brokered his first deal in '96 when he moved Nuno Espirito Santos from Vitória de Guimarães to Deportivo La Coruña. And I believe Bruno was in the bar that he worked at. After that deal, which is mad, after that deal, Mendes gradually attracted more Portuguese players. Hugo Viana's move from Sporting to Newcastle in 2002 for 12 million euros was
It's a
his first.
classic. It's a classic Newcastle United sign at that time. 12 million as well.
You know what? When I read that, I thought, who? Like, what? Because yeah, you're right. 12 million back then is a lot of money, and I know this guy didn't do anything because if he did, I would have heard of him. Uh,
Yeah, it rings a bell, but it's just not. Yeah.
I mean, I was quite young in 2002. I was about 7 or 8, but that was all 32 if they ask you, Dryden. But I think, yeah, that was a bit of a shocking deal. But yeah, that developed part of Mendes' strategy, and he grew and grew and grew. He became a frequent feature at football schools and youth teams throughout Portugal, and that enabled him to sign up Cristiano Ronaldo, which is a fantastic steal, and obviously Ricardo Quaresma.
Mm.
And his current list of clients include Fabinho still, and obviously Cristiano.
Yeah, it's interesting that relationship with Nuno goes back that far. It does actually make a lot of sense. I feel as if that the Wolves picture, and as we go through this podcast as well, this episode is actually starting to make a lot more sense.
Mm.
It does seem to make a lot more sense in that. But it's yeah, I had no idea that Nuno's relationship went back that far, and the fact we've now got so many Portuguese players at Wolves with Nuno as manager, and the influence that Jorge Mendes has over the club, or at least over their transfer policy, is starting to make a bit of sense.
It is indeed. Third on the list is probably the most outspoken of the three, Mina Raiola. He's got commissions, worth $70.3 million and contracts worth $703 million. Those who know Pogba very well will know that this guy is very outspoken when defending his players. He actually played youth team football, which I didn't know and couldn't really tell, but he did do. But he stopped playing at 18 to become head of a football youth team. He then was a player and an administrator, and he was still working as an agent and began working with a agency called Sports Promotions. They helped with several high-profile Dutch players moving to Italian clubs, including Dennis Bergkamp to Inter. After a while, he decided to leave and start his own business, with his first big independent transfer being Pavel Nedved's signing from Sparta Prague
What a
to
player.
Lazio for his impressive performances at Euro '96, where Nedved Czech Republic reached the final. In August 2016, many years later, after multiple clients, he had Zlatan as well. I'm aware he's been with Zlatan, I believe, since his Ajax days. But in 2016, he was part of obviously the deal which took Paul Pogba to Manchester United, where he reportedly made 25 million euros from the 105 million transfer fee, which is mad. That's a lot of money.
I implore anyone who's listening to this to please go on Mina Raiola's Wikipedia page and look at the photo that's there, top right. It's absolutely brilliant. He just looks like he's a member of The Godfather. It's like a black and white photo. He's not black. He's 53 as well. I don't know why it's in black and white, but he just looks like a member of the Italian mafia.
It's weird you said that because he actually went and bought old mobster's house in LA.
Oh, maybe I'll
I
shut my
can't
mouth. And
I can't remember whose house it was. I remember reading it. Well, Mina Raiola, he bought someone's house, buys.
I'm going to keep my mouth shut, I think, then, because I could be getting removed from society.
Yeah. Yeah, he's bought the Miami home of Al Capone. So I think you should keep quiet, right?
Well, I assumed that Mino was the biggest super agent, more because of his, he's outspoken. I mean, there's that picture of him and Pogba in the swimming pool. I think it was a couple of summers ago where they were drinking like out of champagne flutes. Like it was, he looked like a superstar. I mean, he's not the biggest now, but if you look at the list of his players in his kind of roster, you've got the likes of Zlatan and Ronaldo. No, sorry, Ronaldo's Jorge's, but you've got likes of Zlatan and Pogba, as you mentioned. But then you've got more up and coming players there, like Erling Haaland, even the
Mm,
likes of Moise Kean, Matip de Ligt,
hmm
Donnarumma as well. These are quite high profile players. So perhaps Daniel Malin as well. So perhaps we could be seeing him rise up the ranks, particularly as Jonathan Barnett's absolutely no spring chicken. But to be honest with you, before we started exploring this topic, I actually wasn't overly aware who Barnett was. It was probably bring back that point that we only really hear about those often only hear about those really outspoken, flashy agents like Mino.
Yeah, exactly that. What's quite interesting now is the remaining two names in the list. So in fourth place, you've got a guy called Vodka Struth, whose commissions are at 43.7 million,
Mm,
contracts are worth 437 million. He isn't someone who's as involved in the media as the other names on the list, but he's an agent who primarily deals with German clients. And I think this is the point I think is quite important for the pod is it's very noticeable the gulf between revenue between
yeah,
himself and the top three. You could kind of argue with Mina a little bit as well because the other two guys are quite far ahead in the billions. But I would still count him due to maybe the history of clients he's had as well as the persona. But then
yeah,
this guy, I would say, we're looking at about 3 times his contract total to get towards the top two, which is substantial.
yeah.
And I think for him to be the fourth biggest grossing agent in the world says a lot about how big the top two and the top three in particular are in football. I mean, his clients include some brilliant players. I mean, Tony Kroos, Marco Reus, and Upamecano, who's obviously just moved to Bayern Munich for I
Yeah.
think his release clauses in the 40 millions. But I think it says a lot there about you know what is an actual super agent. There are the honourable mentions as well. Kia Joorabchian at Arsenal, who has clients including Luis and Cedric Suarez, who they said had a massive influence there. Pini Zavi, who helped broker Rio Ferdinand's deal to Man United. He's also got Lewandowski on the top of his list. Alessandro Lucci was actually the fifth agent in that top 10 list. His clients include Suso and Bonucci, but his revenue as well his commissions was in the 20s. I think it was 25 million, and his contracts was about in the 300s, which again highlights how big those top two guys are.
Yeah.
So I think from doing this pod, I think what defines a super agent isn't solely the money, it's the brand itself. I think what the three guys have achieved to a certain degree is they are a brand, and also they're within their own right, they're quite newsworthy. I mean, you made a good point about Jonathan Barnett, but through Bale, I've become quite aware of who he is.
Yeah.
He's quite outspoken, and he kind of creates a spotlight to defend him, right? Because that's his biggest client. Same with Raiola. Mendes, probably the same as well. The difficulty for him is obviously he's more involved with Spanish or Portuguese clients. But I think it's the same sort of thing, right? Where they themselves are kind of these brands that move around the game. I mean, Jorge Mendes has his own awards.
Yeah.
He has his own awards, which is just like it's crazy, really, that these people have grown so big within the game now that they have so much influence and so much say. And I think that influence, that media pool, that attention, and that how well they are known throughout the game is what makes them so big, rather than the money solely itself.
Yeah, I mean, no agent to extent as much. This is why it's kind of seen as kind of flawed because if you're an agent and your player is at a club and he's happy at that club, it's still not in your interest for him to stay there for his entire career, is it really? I mean, you'll get a slice of perhaps contract renewals, I'd imagine. But say you're Steven Gerrard, who's at Liverpool for his entire playing career, you're set to as his agent. As much as it's good to be Steven Gerrard's agent for the profile side of it, you're set to make far less than if you are the agent of Zlatan Ibrahimovic, for example.
Mm.
So that's where the I suppose it's the same with anyone who's kind of a middleman, kind of salesman, who has kind of, you're always going to question their morals or their intentions. But I think one of the reasons they're also becoming quite influential now is that the bigger they grow, it's almost like the more clubs and the authorities dare not to challenge their influence. Because I mean, we've seen United spats with the likes of Mina Raiola, but I mean, if you're a club like Arsenal, for example, do you really want to piss off the top three agents in the world? Probably not,
Yeah.
because you're not going to sign this list of current and up and coming players that are within their rosters. So
No, I completely agree. And it kind of goes on to the point about how super agents have changed the markets, which is what you said. So I think what agents have done is they've made negotiations more difficult for clubs by driving hard bargains. We've all been there on Football Manager when you have a difficult agent,
yes, we have
and he's not. You want to pay him 80K a week, and the agent does the little amber symbol, which means, okay, if you
one
lowball
more.
me, yeah, exactly. You lowball me again, we're going to walk away. And I think that kind of mirrors real life as well with these agencies. They drive
Yeah,
hard bargains for their clients, which is why we're seeing astronomical fees for players being paid, not just in terms of transfer fees, but also wages skyrocket. And that won't slow down because money in the game is ever increasing. I also think these agents play such a key role in how these players are portrayed in the media. They really
mm,
protect their clients over bad bits of form, or they point blame at the manager. I mean, Jamie Carragher actually launched an attack on Cedric Suarez, Willian, and Luis, blaming Kia Joorabchian's influence at Arsenal. And Joorabchian literally came out himself and public defended his clients, and basically started mentioning that Carragher's a bad person because of his suspension over Sky, the whole spitting scandal, and
yeah,
like
yeah.
how can you listen to this man who's not respected? He said it on Talk Sport.
So relevant to the actual topic, but yeah,
Yeah, and it's just
so
like
childish.
it's quite mad because these guys, we haven't even met. Kia's not in the top five. He wasn't in the top 10. But these guys that are involved have so much influence and say now that they kind of just come forward and, are willing to enter the media and defend themselves publicly and their clients as he did do them. Jonathan Barnett's the same. He labelled Zidane a disgrace when Bale failed to get his transfer to China. And, they're ultimately trying to protect their player or protect their own image, which will then help them get new clients on board. I kind of feel like that image and that media persona is kind of what makes him super, which is what I mentioned
Yeah,
earlier. But then also there's the flip side as well of how they manipulate markets to benefit clubs. So we're all aware of Jorge Mendes' link to Wolves, where he's officially an advisor to the executive chairman Jeff Shee. But his influence is mad. I mean, Wolves
yeah,
have nine Portuguese players plus the coach. Willian Jose is Brazilian, so obviously Portuguese speaking. So you could say maybe 10 Portuguese speakers, 11, including the coach.
yeah.
In Wolverhampton. Why would there be why would there be 11 Portuguese people in Wolverhampton without Mendes'
Just a
influence?
coincidence. Just a coincidence, mate.
It's crazy the link and influence that he has at the club, and also the ethics of it is a bit weird as well because we said before the call we read about the Fabio Silva deal where he signed for £40 million,
Yeah,
but the chairman publicly came out and said that his release clause was actually 10 million. Now that's probably a lie to a degree, but there may be an element of truth there where ethically, if we've got an agent as an advisor to Portuguese players, then surely the money that the clubs are paying is being dictated by the agent for him to benefit,
yeah,
which is a very murky water because Wolves are. My flatmate said this yesterday. Wolves are in the perfect spot, right? Where no one will complain because of where they are. If Wolves are champions of England, they'll complain because people will say, "Oh, this is because of Mendes' dealings. It's illegal. It's not
yeah.
very good." And if they get relegated, the fans will complain, being like, "Oh, Mendes has given us terrible Portuguese players for like hundreds of millions. He's ruined the club." But Wolves are in the perfect spot where they're just not doing badly enough and not doing well enough that they've kind of gone under the radar. But I think it's something definitely to watch as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, just a bit of background to that. I mean, it is. illegal within football to have for an agent to have a formal role at a football club for obvious reasons, because
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
represent players, they represent the players of other football clubs as well, which is a good point you mentioned there, around how that could influence the market, influence, if you are Wolves and you were top of the Premier League, um, in theory, Jorge Mendes could quite easily, or with some varying degree of success, influence another football club via transfers, via his own clients that are within those clubs, and so it is really shady. And as you said, the money going to him, he's then an inflated fee, suggests an inflated agent fee. What happens to that money after that? It feels like as if everyone's like kind of in on it. Like Wolves are in on it, the ownership, the forcing ownership, Jorge Mendes, his company, and then even the clubs such as Porto, are they in on this as well? Are they, because a lot of Jorge Mendes' clients will be there. He may have influence at that club as well. So you just feel like it is so shady, and it is just a means of gaining an advantage. So I mean, there was talk when they were in the Championship, Wolves have been investigated by, I believe it was the EFL or the FA, but I don't believe that was followed up on. Perhaps it was when they made it to the safe waters of the Premier
Mm.
League. We can get away with much more.
Yeah.
But perhaps that's it. But
No, I completely agree. I think finally to round things off is, what do clubs think? Football's one of those games I had to exhale because it's a tough one. I think football is greedy, full stop. So
yeah,
whether it's the players, the clubs, the owners, everyone's quite greedy. And I think the game currently, or clubs aren't happy with how much money is going towards agents and how much influence they have. I mean, 25 million towards the transfer of Pogba out of 105 is quite a lot. I mean, Wenger famously vowed to never work with agents again after Jorge Mendes messed him around with trying to get Falcao from Porto. He did dilly-dally with, obviously, Mkhitaryan with the Alexis Sanchez deal, but, I guess the relationship thawed then and Arsenal in a tough spot. Managers like OGS have been unhappy with how much say the likes of Raiola have at the club. He's publicly said, literally, Pogba is done at United. He wants to go back to Italy. That's not helpful.
no,
In the middle of a season, it's a long year. You've got a player with such a high profile. That isn't helpful. FIFA are also concerned. They're pushing ahead with new rules to cap the limits of how much agents earn. But it comes back to that point of football is very greedy. So it's a delicate situation. You don't want agents to have total power that can leave clubs vulnerable to bigger sides. If there's a talented young player who's represented by Raiola and you're a Portsmouth or something, and you get outpriced because of his agency fees, that's unfair. But
yeah, true,
on the flip side, these clubs are massive. So
yeah.
it's not as if Arsenal are crying over pennies for not dealing with these agents, but you don't want to give too much power to them because these clubs are strong enough as it is. So it's a really delicate situation, and one which I think will rumble on and on.
Yeah, I mean, agents are seemingly very, very concerned and very obsessed with money, but then so are football clubs as well, even to a high extent. Talk about morals. I mean, a football club would quite happily discard a player or play them far less than what they're worth if they could. I mean, I know I'm generalizing there, can't speak to about every club and every agent in the same way, perhaps, but that is kind of how things are perceived. I mean, we mustn't forget that players are athletes and not businessmen. So you could argue the only two types, or only two kind of stakeholders in the process that are actually morally clean, are the footballers and the fans. I mean, footballers have an interest in money. They get labelled as greedy quite often, but they've still pursued their dream. It's still their dream to perform, and it is still their job. Fans obviously have a vested interest because they're supporters. They enjoy the game. They are the consumers of the sport. Right. Okay. Well, that's all for us from us this week. Thank you, Etches, for the insights on agents and super agents. It's a much talked about topic, one that Gary Neville absolutely loves banging on about. So
Yeah, he does indeed, doesn't he?
yeah. So, but yeah. Thank you all for listening. Continue to subscribe with us on all platforms, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.